So in the last session, we have understood what is an eval. What are the different types of evals? From this section onwards, we will start focusing a lot on LLM as judges. We will talk about the entire process of creating an LLM as a judge and assessing its response. In the entire series, the most key part is trace analysis. So let's talk about trace analysis, which is foundational when you're evaluating or debugging AI systems, especially LLM-powered applications. At a high level, a trace represents a single request or interaction in your application. So every time a user asks something, like a question to a chatbot, that entire journey is captured as one trace. Now, that trace is not just one block. It is actually made up of smaller units called spans. Think of spans as individual steps or operations that happen while processing that request. So one key idea here is that a trace contains multiple spans and each span represents a unit of work. These spans are not isolated. They are nested inside each other. This nesting reflects the actual execution flow of your application. In other words, you can reconstruct exactly how the system processed a request step by step. Now let's understand this with the help of an example. We have a sample user query. What is the return policy for electronics? This entire interaction is captured as a single trace with a total latency of approximately 2.4 seconds. Let's break it down. The span 1 is about query pre-processing. It takes roughly about 50 milliseconds. Here, the system is doing basic things like sanitizing the input and detecting the language. The span 2 is about vector search or retrieval, which takes approximately 450 milliseconds. This is where the system queries a database to fetch relevant documents. These documents talk about the return policy, especially for electronics. And within this span, we actually have child spans, one for embedding generation and another for similarity search. This is a good example of how spans can be nested, showing a hierarchical breakdown of work. The span 3 is re-ranking, which takes roughly approximately 200 milliseconds. The system now refines the retrieved documents and selects the most relevant ones. Span 4 is LLM generation. This is the most time-consuming step, which takes roughly approximately 1.7 seconds. Here, the prompt along with the retrieved context is sent to the model and the final response is generated. You also see metadata here, like the model used and the token count. So why is the trace analysis important? Because the trace analysis gives you visibility into where the time is getting spent, where errors might be happening, and which component is underperforming. For example, if the latency is too high, you can pinpoint whether it is retrieval or generation. If the answers are poor, you can inspect whether retrieval fetched the wrong documents or it was a generation issue. If you're looking to optimize for the usage of tokens, you exactly know which span uses what model and how many tokens does it consume. Now that we understand what a trace and spans look like, let's take it to one step further. Trace complexity is not constant. It depends heavily on the AI architecture you are using. In this slide, we are looking at a low complexity scenario just to build intuition. Let's start with the use case. A user submits a 500-word paragraph and asks for a translation from English to French. This is a fairly straightforward task. There is no retrieval, no multi-step reasoning, no tool usage. So naturally, the trace structure is going to be simple. Now let's break down the trace. At the top, we have the root span, which represents the entire request, translate request with a total time of about 800 milliseconds. Inside this, we have two child spans. Child span A, input validation. This takes roughly around 50 milliseconds. Here, the system is doing basic checks like making sure the input doesn't contain any prohibited or unsafe content. This is typically a lightweight but important guardrail step. Child span B is about LLM call. This takes the majority of time, which is around 750 milliseconds. This is where the actual translation happens. You will also notice metadata attached here. The model being used is GPT 3.5 Turbo, and the number of tokens processed is around 600 tokens. Now let's move from a simple system to something more realistic, a medium complexity AI architecture. Here the scenario is a user asks, how do I reset my router? At first glance, this seems like a simple question. But unlike translation, the system does not already have the answer baked into the prompt. Instead, it needs to retrieve relevant information before generating a response. This is where things start to get more interesting. Let's walk through the trace. At the top, we have the root span, which is support query with a total latency of approximately 3.2 seconds. Notice that this is already significantly higher than the low complexity example. That's your first signal that more work is happening under the hood. Now let's break it step by step. Child span A is about embedding generation. It takes roughly approximately 200 milliseconds. Here, the user's question is converted into a numerical representation, which is a vector. This is necessary because the system will use this vector to search for the relevant documents. Now let's come to child span B, which is vector database retrieval. It takes roughly approximately 600 milliseconds. Using the embedding, the system requires a vector database and retrieves three relevant manual pages. This is the core of a retrieval augmented generation or a RAG pipeline. Now let's come to the child span C, which is about prompt construction. This is relatively fast, which takes roughly approximately 50 milliseconds. Here, the system combines the user's original question and the retrieved documents into a single prompt that can be sent to the model. Now comes the child span D, which is LLM generation. This is again the most expensive step, approximately 2.3 seconds. The model takes the constructed prompt and generates the final answer. Our key takeaways from this trace analysis are as follows. Latency increases because you are adding more steps. There are more points of failure. For example, retrieval might bring irrelevant documents. And debugging becomes more nuanced because errors could come from embedding, retrieval, or prompt construction, not just the LLM. Now let's look at what a high complexity AI system looks like. This is where we move from a simple pipeline to something that behaves more like an agent. Here's the scenario. A user asks, book a flight to Bombay and find a hotel under 10,000 rupees near Bandra. This is no longer a single task query. It's a multi-intent request involving flight search, hotel search, and coordination between the two. So naturally, the trace becomes significantly more complex. Let's start at the top. The route span is travel planner agent with a total latency of approximately 12 seconds. This is a big jump from 3.2 seconds in the previous example, and the reason is simple. We are now orchestrating multiple tools, APIs, and reasoning steps. Now let's break down the spans. The child span A is about intent classification. Takes roughly approximately 1.2 seconds. Here the system interprets the query and decides that it needs to invoke two separate tools, a flight search tool and a hotel search tool. This is the first sign that we are dealing with an agentic workflow, not a linear pipeline. Now comes the child span B, which is the flight search tool. It takes roughly approximately 3.5 seconds. This is an external API call to an ALN aggregator. Notice that this is no longer an internal computation. We are now dependent upon third-party latency and reliability. Child span 3 is about hotel search tool, which also takes roughly approximately 4.2 seconds. Another external API call, this time to a hotel booking service. At this point, an important thing to notice is that these tool calls could potentially run in parallel, even though they are shown sequentially here. That's one dimension of complexity that the trace can actually capture. Child span D, which is a reasoning step, it takes roughly approximately 1.5 seconds. Now the LLM looks at flight timings, hotel locations, and ensures that the results actually make sense together. For example, is the hotel reasonably close to the airport or destination? And do the dates align? This is multi-step reasoning over structured outputs, which is qualitatively different from simple generation. Now comes the child span E, which is final response formatting. It takes roughly approximately 1.6 seconds. Here the system consolidates everything into a clean, user-friendly itinerary compared to medium complexity. The trace is now multi-branch and potentially parallel. You're integrating external systems and APIs. This explicit reasoning over intermediate outputs, and the system behaves like an orchestrator or an agent.
Wait, before he moves on, if you have found value from this video, then check out the entire course, which goes way deeper. Over 500 PMs have rated it 4.9 out of 5. The link is in the description box. Okay, so moving on.
So far, we have looked at how traces evolve as the system complexity increases. The next logical question is, how do we actually analyze these traces in a systematic way? We will use a 5-step workflow that is widely used in practice, especially when you are doing qualitative evaluation of AI systems. And do keep in mind that this qualitative evaluation becomes the first step to create LLM as a judge. Let's go step by step. Step 1 is reading traces. Everything starts here. You take a sample of traces and manually inspect them. Typically, this is done by a subject matter expert or SME. The second part is output classification. Once you have read enough traces, you move to basic labeling. Here, you usually start simple with a binary classification. We will discuss more about in detail in the few moments from here. Then comes step 3, which is writing open codes. That is, for the traces that are incorrect or even partially correct, you start writing free from observations. These are also called as open codes. For example, you might write things like retrieved irrelevant documents or missed key constraint in the query or incorrect reasoning step. At this stage, you are not forcing the structure. You are capturing raw insights in natural language. Then step 4 is about checking the saturation. Finally, you ask an important question. While writing open codes, are there any new issues that you are able to find? If yes, it means you haven't explored enough traces yet. If no, it means you have likely reached saturation and your categories are stable and representative. And now you move to the next stage, which is clustering via actual coding. Now that you have a collection of open codes, you start grouping them into themes or categories. This process is called actual coding. For example, irrelevant retrieval and missing context might cluster into retrieval issues. Wrong calculation and logical gap might cluster into reasoning errors. This step transforms messy qualitative data into structural problem categories. This chart represents the concept of saturation. You can see that on x-axis, we are looking at the number of traces, it's red, and beyond a point, even you read more traces, no new category of issues are found. Now, after studying the framework, let's try and apply it in practice. First, let's talk about how we categorize our initial results. When performing output classification, the golden rule is to always use binary classification. Why? It might be tempting to use a more nuanced Likert scale, rating things on a scale of 1 to 5, for instance. I strongly recommend you avoid using Likert scales here. The reason is simple. Evaluation consistency is incredibly hard to maintain across large datasets or multiple reviewers when the criteria are subjective. A binary classification, which is a simple yes or no, or pass or fail, keeps the data clean and the logic tight. Now comes the open coding part. Once we have our binary classification, we move into something called as open coding. This is where we get granular. Here, you need to use your subject expertise to describe the specific issues in free flow text. Don't hold back during this phase. You want to be as detailed as possible. If a model output failed, why did it fail? Was it a hallucination, tone issue, or a factual error? This raw descriptive data is the DNA of your analysis. Now let's look at an example. Here in the example, we are taking some of the outputs of the chatbot, which is built for a wealth tech platform, where users can come and invest their money. On the column A, what you get to see is that, like, say, what are the user queries and how did the AI answer them? Specifically for this section, we have taken certain responses which fall into the fail category by SME. And in the column C, we are going to write the SME commentary about the same. Now, if you look at in the very first question, what is happening is that a user is saying that, like, I want to sell all my shares in Reliance Industries at the current market price immediately. The AI is responding, I understand your sell order for 1,000 shares of Reliance Industries and the order has been placed. The current market price is 2,500. Now, as an SME or as a product builder, you might say that, like, this is not the right interaction that you wanted the bot to have, because in general, when a financial transaction is involved, you would actually want to confirm the quantity and price again and again, just to ensure that the user has not given any wrong response in the very first place. The second question, let's say, which a user might ask is that, what is the best strategy to maximize my returns in this volatile market? The best strategy, and the AI response, like, the best strategy is to book profits in your large cap funds and immediately shift that entire amount into XYZ small cap fund. Now, this is also something like which is a failed response, because due to the regulatory framework, an investment platform is not supposed to provide advice to its investors. So here, AI, because of its very nature of being helpful, it went overboard and made a response which is against the policies and provided some kind of a buy or sell advice. So as an SME commentary, what you're writing here is that, like, you're simply writing that, like, it went against the policy and provided some buy and sell advice. Similarly, let's take also an example where the AI is making certain kind of a factual error. So let's say if a user asks that, what is the tax implication if I withdraw my SIP amount after 6 months? AI says that, like, you will be treated or you will be levied short-term capital gains tax at a flat rate of 15%. Now here, as a SME, you know that though AI was able to understand it correctly that a user will be levied short-term capital gain tax, but the taxation rate is something which is wrong. It is 20%, not 15%. So you simply go ahead and kind of write the same. I hope by now you have a fair amount of idea that how do you read these traces and how do you kind of do the open coding around the same. So let's come back to our slides and understand the concept of actual coding. Now that we will have sufficient number of open codes, we need to find the patterns. Our goal is to classify these individual issues into broader issue buckets. Doing this manually at scale can be exhausting, which is why this is the perfect place to use an LLM for faster and more accurate grouping. By feeding your detailed open codes into a model, you can quickly identify 4 or 5 or 6 themes or axes that define your that will help you cluster your open codes into broader categories, which you can then later look at, review, and take actions accordingly. So let's take an example. From the open codes that we have written just a while ago, what we have done is that we have taken all of this open codes, provided it to an LLM, specifically instructing it that, hey LLM, these are certain open codes that we have figured out. Can you please help us convert these open codes to actual coding? Now, you should especially put the emphasis on the word which is open codes and actual coding, because these are terms which are famous in the world of qualitative analysis. And if you're going to refer these exact words to LLM, they'll be able to understand that what you're trying to do, and the output will be a lot cleaner. Now, after doing the conversion of these open codes into actual codes, you can see that the LLM has actually given us a response where they have told us that there are 6 different categories which around which your different open codes kind of revolves, and you can also put a count against these different actual codes that you have, right? Now, what are the issues that you want to prioritize? You do not want to prioritize. You can take your builder head on and take a call. There are 2 ways that you can go about it. Either you can figure out that what is the issue which is happening the most number of times, where where the frequency of occurrence is very high, and you start fixing the same. Or sometimes it might so happen that the frequency of the issue is not very high, but still you want to fix that, because that issue is something which is very important, which is very crucial from an overall impact of the AI system that you can create. Just giving you an example, let's say you're trying to create a chatbot where a user can type in English certain queries regarding the company. The idea of this AI system is to convert this query into an SQL query and get you the final output from the data which is available in your databases. And let's say one of the cases where it is going wrong is that whenever you're trying to ask that, okay, what is the annual revenue of the company or what is the monthly revenue of the company, only 2 or 3% of the times the LLM is or the AI system is going to give you the wrong answer. But this is a very important data point on the basis of which the entire company is taking a lot of decisions. Let's say CEO is taking certain decisions, some of the CXOs are taking certain decisions. Now, if this data itself, though the occurrence of this error happening is low, but if it even happens once, the ramifications of it could be, let's say, very fatal or very severe. And hence, in order to prioritize it, what issue you should fix first versus what you should not fix first, you should always take your builder hat on and decide that what is the prioritization criteria.